G'day, my name is Patrick and welcome to another adventure. On this trip, I'm off for a 3-day hike in one of Australia's most beautiful destinations, the Freycinet National Park on the east coast of Tasmania. Join me to experience some of Tasmania's pristine wilderness and diverse history on the Freycinet Circuit, about 30 kilometres over 3 days on this stunning multi-day hike. Super excited for a little solo adventure. Sad not to have Lara at my side, but she's done it before. I think I'll be carrying about 20 kilos, which is definitely a few more than I probably need to. But hey, this is a bit of a rush job, so just getting it done at the moment. Having a quick little break here to stretch the legs. Maria Island's another national park, and it essentially serves as a bit of a Noah's Ark to so much of Tasmanian wildlife. Freycinet is Tassie's oldest national park and offers many excellent day hikes catering to all fitness levels. Some favourites include Mount Amos, Wineglass Bay Lookout, Cape Torville and Sleepy Bay. For me, it was time to get checked in and get on the way. Well, I've made it to the start of the Freycinet Circuit. Just parked up the bike, got everything locked away and covered everything up. And it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm expecting a 3.5-4 hour walk to my campsite this evening. Just as I was slinging my backpack on there with my final supply of water, I've realised that my backpack has given up the ghost, almost. So I've got nothing connecting this side of the backpack, this strap. I might have to jimmy rig something together a little bit later on. In the meantime, it's my left strap and also my hip straps doing the body of the work. I'm sure I can get by for the next couple of days, but weather's looking good. I'm all ready to go. It's getting on late in the day, so I'll give it a go anyway. Good going thus far. So it starts as a path for the first little while, and then you're just walking over these boulders. It's a bit undulating, a little bit up, a little bit down. It's hard yakka though. It's pretty hot this afternoon. I've got a fair bit of weight on. So I'm heading south currently, but looking back along the peninsula, you can see the town of Coles Bay and Great Oyster Bay. This little island out there in the bay as well called Picnic Island. I'm going to check in on my progress, see how I'm going. Time for some water, I think. Just rounding this little headland, and I can't be far away from getting down to Hazards Beach. It's full of pines here, and it's super dry. It must get smashed by the winds. Whenever the wind comes through and these trees and branches rub together, it's a bit of an eerie sound through here. Just started to get first glimpses of the blues and greens of the beach here, and I've spotted a kookaburra. Keeping a close eye on something. Made it to Hazards Beach. Started to see some of that beautiful granite this part of the world is known for. So I'm going to be walking along this beach for the next hour or so, but ultimately heading towards those mountains off in the distance. So that's Mount Graham and Mount Freycinet. There is another separate island off the southern end of the peninsula. It's called Schouten Island, named by the Dutch after a guy called Justus Schouten. But this beach is famous for its indigenous middens, so we should be able to see some of the native oysters that are compressed deeply into the impacted sand. There's a wooden staircase here that separates the western side of the peninsula with over there at the east. So there's a track they call the Isthmus track that connects the two. It takes about 30 minutes to the iconic Wineglass Bay. We're going the long way around. Here along Hazards Beach and so many other parts of the peninsula, you find tens and tens of thousands of these native oysters. And with winds and tide and time and pressure, they're slowly being revealed. This national park that we're now in is named after a French guy, Henri or Louis de Freycinet. So they were a couple of brothers that were on the Baudin expedition of the early 1800s. Only talking just over a couple of 100 years in terms of European exploration, settlement and industry. Hazards Beach and the Hazard Mountain Range, it's named after another convict as well. There's a couple of little islands just over here. One called Refuge Island that was named by the French, and then Promise Rock, that was the name of the boat that Captain Black Hazards crashed in on. But the area for many tens of thousand years was inhabited and nurtured by the great Oyster Bay people. The Oyster Bay Nation was broken up into different groups, and variously here on the peninsula there was the Lunta Tetamora Lahoina, the Turanamara Namena and the Lineta Maihena. These people lived off the land, and it was the women that would cover themselves in seal fat and dive down to get those Angazi oysters. Now I do some scuba diving in the area here, but without neoprene and without the right equipment, I can't imagine spending too long in the water. And what do we have here? As I'm wandering along here, I've come across the carcass of, I think, what is a pilot whale. It was a couple of months ago that there was a mass beaching, I think it was about 18 or so, of these short fin pilot whales. That wind seems to have calmed down now, and it's really flat out here on the western side. Thinking about that whale, this entire area, before there was oyster farming and before there was tourism, whaling was the biggest industry on the peninsula. And they were predominantly hunting the humpback whale and the southern right whale. Captain Black Hazards, he was a convict. He'd come out here and served his time, and he became a whaler. Quite a successful one apparently. And the story goes, which I'm sure has its embellishments, its colourings, his boat that was called the Promise, it was run aground on a rock just out here next to Refuge Island, which now bears the name Promise Rock. He was said to have swam here, climbed over the top of the mountain range that also now bears his name, and made his way all the way around to Swansea where he was able to get some help to come and assist the rest of his men. Wineglass Bay also gets its name from the time of the whalers. Nowadays, tourists come from all over the world to get their photo of that crescent-shaped white silica sand beach and the blues, greens, turquoises of the deep Wineglass Bay. But not that long ago in European history, it was a site where whales were processed. The whales would be hauled in. Their blood gave the waters this deep crimson colour. And supposedly, from an elevation looking down on the bay, given its shape, it looked a lot like a glass of red wine. Freycinet National Park's one of the, if not the, busiest national parks all over Tasmania. And here on Hazards Beach, a half an hour walk away from Wineglass Bay, I find it pretty remarkable in the middle of summer to have this beach all to myself. Lots of these big Pacific gulls out here on the beach. Got these really strong, robust, yellow, orange beaks. And just at the end, it looks like they've got a little bit of lipstick at. So I'm at the southern end here of Hazards Beach, and there's this freshwater creek. From what I've read, it translates as like the Tassie tiger. Crazy to think that this marsupial predator used to live in these parts. How special would that have been? Track's clearly been bashed and thrashed by weather. There's lots of scats of wombats along this path, taking the path of least resistance. Maybe I'll have a chance to see some at the campsite tonight. I just saw either a flame robin or maybe even a pink robin. It's been really nice, flat, sandy track for the last hour or so. It's pretty muggy in here though. Looks like I've made it to Cook's Beach. I can see a stingray out there, just on the top of the water. Looks just like a turtle, but I can see its wings just flicking up. So half an hour walk to Cook's Beach Camp. Looks like it's all the way along the beach here. And come back here tomorrow to head on up to Mount Graham, Freycinet, onwards and upwards. This is so beautiful. Look how peaceful it is. I've just arrived at Cook's Beach campsite. It's just before 8 o'clock. Quick note, freshwater can be one of the challenges of the Freycinet Loop, so it's definitely worth checking in with the national parks about availability. Okay, mate. How you doing? I got here just enough time to mostly get the tent set up before it got too dark. Lots of big, mean looking bull ants here at the campsite. Some kookaburras, a few paddy melons and wallabies hanging around. I've just got the gas cooker on now. I'm gonna have a bit of dinner and then do a bit of reading. It's really dark now. That took much longer than I expected. Quick dinner. It's about 10 o'clock. Try and get some rest. Have an early start. Morning. A bit stiff and sore this morning. Rained a little bit overnight. I like the sound of rain on the tent. I think it's going to be quite a hot day today, so it'd be good to get a start on these big mountains whilst the sun's not too high in the sky. Just heading down to the beach briefly. Supposedly there's an old stone Indigenous fish trap. Made some oats for breakfast. Got a little bit of honey and a bit of cinnamon to go with it as well. My bag strap snapping yesterday on this side. I've taken my camera strap off and I'm trying to work it out so that at least I have a shoulder strap, because I've got a lot of climbing to do today. Pretty happy with that. Ooh, heavy. So I'd say I have about 8-9 litres of water on board. So a fair bit of weight. Looks like some clouds up in the sky. Some clouds would probably help me today because the sun's gonna be quite hot. It's getting up to about 25 degrees. Let's go. There's a big cruise ship just coming around the corner here. Oyster catchers. Just arrived back at the junction. So, back to the car park is that way, and over to Wineglass Bay is this way. So it's saying 6 hours or 11 kilometres. And it also has a separate sign for Mount Graham, which is saying 3 hours, 5.5. So basically we head on over toward Wineglass Bay and then along the way have the option to drop the backpack off and head on up to that peak. Some Tassie devil scat there. Whenever the pack feels a little bit heavy, start to run through your brain a bit of a priority system of what do I really need, what's excessive, what should I have brought, what could I drop a little bit of, etc. And with the weather like this, I think, oh geez, I probably don't need that jacket or that pair of like tracky dacks that I wear when I get into camp at night. Food wise, I don't have too much. I've just got what's right and probably a little bit more. This camera. No, I love this camera. But I must say, of late, I'm really only using it for wildlife. And I've got the big zoom lens on it. Well, big for this camera. So I've got it for things like birds and snakes and wombats and wallabies. But when you don't see too much of it, you start to think, oh geez, what have I got it for? But I bet you if I didn't bring it, I would have seen 5 tiger snakes on the first day and pink robins everywhere. Tassie tiger would have turned up. So it's good that I've got it. So I'm up at about 220 metres above sea level. So this is the height of the famous Wineglass Bay lookout walk. But for today, it's really only around about a third of the way. So the highest peak, which I aspire to get to, is Mount Freycinet, which is about 620. So a long way to go. I'm finding it pretty hard. As well.
So I totally dig, you know, look, watching Nadal and his routines, and I'm fascinated by that stuff because I'm very Durban. So I've been a thing where at 70 or 72, bing, you're no longer.
It's getting quite windy, so it makes me think I'm getting to the top of the saddle here. So that'll be Mount Freycinet, and I've got plenty of time if I want to head on up there. I might get to the junction first and maybe have something to eat and then head on up from there. Got this 10-litre sack here, which I thought I filled up at least half of, but it doesn't feel like it. I've had a couple of bottles of water this morning and just been filling up as I go, and it feels like it's getting pretty low. At the moment I've still got 3 litres plus whatever's left in here, but that's got to get me another 8 k's or so to camp, cooking this evening, and then hoping to have at least a litre for tomorrow.
He was in his 70s.
I just met some fellow walkers and they said it's pretty much bouldering from here. Hot and sweaty. Just made it to the top of Mount Freycinet. You can see down the bottom there. I can, it's probably not great for the camera. The little junction from where we've come from. And you can even see the track. Looks like a goat track meandering up towards Mount Graham, which is where we're off to next. Down south, you can see Shooting Island. So that's part of Freycinet National Park as well. Wow, check this out. Directly straight ahead, getting our first glimpse of Wineglass Bay and this range here, the Hazard Mountain Range. So these giant boulders I'm jumping over, some of them are covered in this lichen and a type of moss. It's a type of granite, pink granite. The mountain that slopes off towards the end there before Parsons is Baudin. And it's recognising a French maritime icon and navigator by the name of Nicolas Baudin, who led a research expedition here between the years of 1800 and they arrived back in France in 1804, minus quite a few men who had died through sometimes disease and malnourishment, and people had mutinied and deserted along the way. But another guy not to make it all the way back was Baudin himself, who died on the Ile-de-France in 1803 through disease. So upon his death, a guy called Perron took over. And in Perron's records of the journey and expedition, Nicolas Baudin scantily rates a mention. The expedition was supposedly generously funded by the Little Corporal, the man that came to rule so many parts of the world, Napoleon Bonaparte. His wife Josephine was very enthused by having all of these various weird and wonderful creatures from the other side of the world to be brought back. There's comical stories about wombats and kangaroos sharing the quarters of leaders such as Baudin on the way back. So the Baudin expedition was running concurrently with that of one of the English, and a name that's probably far more common in the annals of Australian history, a guy by the name of Matthew Flinders, the name of our country itself, Australia, that was given to us by Matthew Flinders. Flinders is credited with having the first close quarter circumnavigation of Australia. But running at the same time was this scientific exploration led by Baudin on the boats, the Naturalist and the Geograph. If you flick through recordings of early depictions and drawings and etchings of wildlife in Australia, you'll certainly come across Joseph Banks, who was the naturalist on Captain Cook's expedition. But you'll almost definitely also come across some of these French drawings, excuse my French pronunciation here, but along the way there was a couple of guys called Petit and Lesueur, and through their drawings we can see what the French were experiencing along the way. And that's everything from the very, very exotic and bizarre egg-laying mammals like echidnas and the platypus, but also their interactions with the local indigenous peoples, even here of the Oyster Bay Nation. Nowadays, this entire peninsula is named after someone from that expedition, the Freycinet Peninsula. That is, of course, the same name of the mountain that I'm currently on, the tallest peak in all of the Freycinet Peninsula at 620 metres. Postcard picture perfect today. The blues, the navies, the light greens, and the lovely silica sand. And to imagine it wasn't so long ago that that water was stained with the blood of the whales. I think before long it plateaus out for a little while before we drop on over the other side. Way off in the distance you can see Ile de Faux, or Ile de Phoque, named by the French as well, the island of seals. And then beyond that it's Maria Island, a national park island with all the wombats. Shit. Need the records showed that there had been. That's pretty hard yakka getting up that last bit of hill there. Just here at the top of Mount Graham. The wind's just subsided, I'm sure only momentarily. So from Mount Freycinet, go down into this saddle, you drop a couple of 100 metres, and then it's quite a steep ascent to get up to Mount Graham here. And it's a rather crude path. It's a rocky path, and with tree roots, it really seems to have been carved with water and wind. But it's a really magnificent view, looking down at Hazards and Wineglass Bay Beach and the Hazards mountain range off in the distance. I'm pretty keen to drop out of this wind now, get down into this little plateau over here and start making my way down to that specky beach. I can see the path I've got to get to, and I'm sure there is a path out to get this lovely viewpoint, but I'm not on it. So I'm just doing a bit of bush bashing at the moment and keeping an eye out for snakes. A bit of a drop off here. I feel like this part of the track is going on forever. I think I've got about 1 kilometre to go. I have had 4 litres of water today, but still feeling a little bit dehydrated. I think one thing that's getting to me is this really swirling chaotic wind. Just feels like it's funneling through the saddle here and bouncing off the mountains. I don't know, it's the kind of wind that really gets in my head. Wow. Hey mate. Just arrived at Wineglass Bay campsite, and it's such a nice place here, so I'm going to get my tent set up, get organised. It's going to be very nice to take this big backpack off. Pretty nice out here on the beach this morning. Just finishing up a coffee. I'm pretty well packed up. So this morning, I'm gonna walk the length of Wineglass Bay. Then it's a reasonably steep ascent up to the Wineglass Bay lookout, which takes you over the saddle between Mason and Amos, and then it's just a nice meander down to the car park. This wind is so chaotic and gusty and all over the place. Final walk this morning, just under 5Ks. Wind still whistling through here. Look at how clear this water is. Lots of wallabies around the campsite. Probably been fed at some stage and getting scraps of little bits and bobs, unfortunately, that have been left behind. Pretty happy seeing that blue tongue this morning too. It's only shallow for a little bit and then it drops off. Gets really deep, really fast. And that made it a really good spot to be able to bring the whales in and they'd be processed in this area. There's these tiny little hooded plovers that are nesting in the sand edges up here. And tiny little things in the way they walk across the sand. They sort of skitter along the sand. And they can be hard to see. So you've got to be really careful walking through these sand sites so as not to disturb their nesting areas. It's very cute to watch them gain momentum, skitter faster and faster, and then whoosh, they take off like jets. So just come off the amazing Wineglass Bay beach. I've got one final climb now. So from a different perspective, Hazards Beach over there, Cook's Camp, Mount Freycinet, Mount Graham, and where we camped last night, and back up this way.
There must have been many throughout the 19th century.
Coming back down through these incredible boulders here that have forged a path. Bike's all packed up, strapped down, ready for the ride back. we're back in the shed where we started a couple of days ago. I've just finished packing down, sorting all of my gear. We've got some fun stuff coming up. We've got the 3 Capes track, the overland track, some scuba diving, some kayaking adventures, a couple of little trips on the motorcycle as well. So if you like content related to travel, the outdoors and adventure, hit that subscribe button. It helps out a lot, and see you on the next one.